Who did you steal this shop from, boy? A black man in a clean shirt with his own name on it? Don't make me laugh. You look like you belong in a cage, not behind a desk on Dell Street.
Before Marcus Treadway could answer, Pell's hand came across in one flat, unhurried sweep, and a full cup of scalding black coffee went across Marcus's chest, soaking through, running down the white-stitched letters of his own name.
You think you can play gentleman in my town? You're nothing but a glorified car thief, and every one of your color is just a target waiting to happen. People like you don't own a $2 million vehicle unless you're running drugs for a living.
Marcus kept his hands visible. His voice stayed level.
This is my shop, officer. I have the bank paperwork.
Paperwork doesn't mean you own this place.
It's all legitimate. You're welcome to see it.
Paperwork? Your kind always has fake papers.
Then he drove Marcus backward into the quarter panel of a $2.6 million automobile, tore the folder out of his hand, and threw 41 pages into a puddle of transmission fluid on a floor Marcus had poured himself.
Get on your knees. I don't care what you built. In this county, you're just property to be taken.
What Hollis Pell did not know was that the man he'd just put on the floor was a retired Tier 1 Delta Force commander who had spent 6 years learning how to end a man without ever laying a hand on him. In exactly 52 minutes, Pell's world was going to catch fire. Not the way you think. Nobody kicked his door in. Nobody made a phone call. At 7:08 that evening, a 26-year-old rookie was going to walk into a locker room, set his body camera in a wall cradle, and go home. And and no living person could delete it. The fuse was lit at 7:08 p.m. It burned for 11 months. 4 millions. $118,000 a year came through Hollis Pell's unit. By the end of this, that line is gone. Stay with me, and I'll show you who deleted it. It wasn't him. Welcome back to the channel, where we show you the exact moment a corrupt power structure walks into something it cannot move. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Now watch how one officer's disgust for a black man who dared to build something of his own became the most expensive mistake of his life. Every February, Deputy Chief Lyle Fenn stood in front of the Ardmore County Commission with a laser pointer. And on slide 9, there was a bar chart. The bars went up. That was the point of slide 9. Underneath, in 28-point type, special interdiction, detail, asset recovery, FI revenue, and a number, 4 millions. $118,000. Somebody at a whiteboard, years before Fenn got there, had picked the unit's radio call sign, and nobody in that building had ever blinked at it. The call sign was Harvest. Here's the thing about Lyle Fenn, and it isn't what you're expecting. Fenn had never used a slur in his life. He'd have fired a man for it. There was a photo on his wall of himself with 3 pastors at a back-to-school giveaway. And he wasn't cynical about it. He'd stayed late. He'd carried boxes. What Fenn did was simpler and much worse. He built a machine that paid for itself, put its earnings on slide 9 every February, and never once asked what it ate. $4.1 million is 2 lifts, 9 vehicles, and 11 salaries. Take it away, and 11 people go home. So nobody took it away. And every February, the bars went up, and the room applauded. Treadway Coach and Restoration occupied bays 3 through 9 of a brick building on Dell Street, in the part of Halloran they call the Kiln District, because 100 years ago it made brick, and now it mostly makes nothing. Marcus Oriel Treadway was 54, 6'2", built the way men are built by work and not by a gym. Navy work shirt. Name stitched over the left pocket in white script. Not Marcus Treadway. In Bay 6, under 140 watts of color-corrected light, sat a 1971 Hemi, CUDA, convertible, One of 11 built. Agreed, value, $2.6 million. 4 months in the paint alone, and the paint had a name, a factory color from 1971. The color is called Curious Yellow. The car belonged to Roberta Loomis, 79, of Bell Ridge, whose husband bought it new and drove it to the hospital the night their daughter was born. On the shelf beside the office door sat a brown accordion folder, soft at the corners, with one word on the tab in marker, whose, in 9 years on Dell Street, Marcus Treadway had been asked to prove the cars in his bays belonged to his customers 11 times, twice by police. So, he kept a folder for it, where he could reach it without looking. That isn't bitterness. That's inventory. And in the floor, safe under 2 feet of concrete, sat $250,000 in bank-strapped hundreds. Withdrawn Thursday, with a receipt. Escrowed with a title company. Due Monday, at a closing on the warehouse next door, 41 Dell, which he was going to knock a doorway into for 4 more lifts and a paint booth. He had 4 names on a yellow legal pad in the drawer. Kids from the Kiln District. 2 of them had already told their mothers. Detective Arlo Spate had a rule. He'd made it in 2011. And by now, he told it like a joke. Which is how you know a man has stopped hearing himself. You don't take from people who can afford a lawyer. You take from people who can't afford to miss a Tuesday. That's the entire crime. In one sentence, out of the mouth of the man committing it. Forfeiture doesn't require a charge, or a conviction, or even an accusation against a person. The case gets filed against the money. To get it back, you need a lawyer. A filing fee, 18 to 36 months, and the ability to lose Tuesdays. Pell and Spade had run Harvest for 6 years and had never once been wrong. Because the people they were wrong about went away. They watched Dell Street for 3 weeks, and on the 20th, at 4:41 inches the afternoon, the county tip line took an anonymous call, 2 minutes and 9 seconds. A male voice, distorted, unhurried. He said narcotics money was moving through a restoration shop on Dell. He said it twice. He gave the address, then he hung up, and the recording went into a system where it sat, unplayed, for 206 days, because nobody had ever once wondered whether a tip was real. 93 minutes later, the door came in. The roll-up doors were half down against the heat. Marcus was hand-buffing the CUDA's left rear quarter panel when the side door came off its jam. Ardmore County. Nobody move. Hollis Pell came through first. Tactical vest over a golf shirt. Badge on a chain. Weapon out and pointed at the floor, which is a decision. A gun pointed at the floor terrifies a man, exactly as much as one pointed at his chest, and it will never appear in a report. In his left hand, a paper cup of gas station coffee. He'd carried it in through the door, which tells you exactly how dangerous he thought this was. Wade Purnell, 26, 14 months, on the job, stopped in the doorway and did the thing they'd taught him. He pressed the button on his chest, and a light went from black to red at 6:15 and 38 seconds. He was the only person in that building who turned a camera on. Pells and Spates had electrical tape over the lenses. That is not a metaphor. It's $2 at a hardware store. Marcus set the cloth on the fender. Slow. Both hands to chest height. Palms open. Pell walked up and stopped at 18 inches. Looked at the shirt. Treadway around. You're looking at him. Pell's eyes went down to the name. Then back up. No, he said. I mean the owner. And then Hollis Pell laughed. 1 syllable. 9 people heard it. The shop went quiet the way a room goes quiet when everybody has understood the next 10 minutes and nobody wants to say so. You've already heard what he said next. I won't make you sit through it twice. What I want you to see Is the cup? At 6:16 and 20 seconds p.m. Hollis Pell threw a full cup of scalding coffee onto a man who was standing still with his hands at chest height. In a room with 9 witnesses, and he did it left-handed, without setting his feet. The way you flick lint off a jacket, that is not a struggle. Nobody was resisting. That is a battery, committed by an armed man, out of pure administrative boredom. The coffee soaked through the navy cotton and ran down the white stitching. He poured it on the name, and here is the only fact in this story that matters. And not one person in that building knew it. Wade Purnell's camera was still running. That's my name, Marcus said. Marcus Treadway. This is my building. Deeds in the office. Sure. Pell was already walking, looking at the cars. Nice stuff in here. Whose is it? Customers. Sure. Pell said again. Marcus said, Sir, can I ask what this is about? That's the unforgivable thing. Not resistance. A question. We got a tip. Pell said. Narcotics proceeds. There's a safe in the back. There's $250,000 in it. It's a closing payment on the building next door. Monday. 10 a.m. Halloran title. The withdrawal receipt is on that desk. The escrow letter's on that desk. The purchase agreement's on that desk. 41 pages. It's been face up since Tuesday. Pell picked up the stack. He did not read it. He fanned it once with his thumb. The way a man checks a deck for a marked card. Your kind always has fake papers. And he threw 41 pages into a puddle of transmission fluid in Bay 4. Then he turned around, smiling, about to say something he sincerely believed. And this is the sentence that outlives every other sentence in this story. You know who has paperwork? People who knew they'd need paperwork. And there it is. There has never been an answer to that sentence. Its architecture is that the evidence of your innocence is the evidence of your guilt. And the more of it you have, the guiltier you are. And Marcus Treadway, who had spent 6 years reading men in rooms, understood that instantly and decided to give them the money. Safe's in the back. I'll open it. Keys on my belt. So get it. Sir. I'm going to reach down with my right hand. The key's on my left hip. So I'll have to bring my hand across my body. I'm going to do it slow. Tell me when you're ready. That is a protocol. Announce the hand. Announce the destination. Never surprise. A nervous man holding a weapon. He'd taught it to 22-year-olds in a room with no windows, so they wouldn't get shot at a checkpoint in a country that doesn't exist under that name anymore. He was 54. And he was doing it in his own shop. On the street where he was born, the safe opened. Neat bank straps. Blue and white. Pell made a sound in his throat. That's a lot of cash for a mechanic. It's a lot of cash for anybody. Marcus said, That's why it's in a safe. Spate held the duffel open. Pell knelt and started moving straps into it, and somewhere in there he came up too fast. Put his forearm into Marcus's chest and walked him backward 3 steps. Marcus's hip hit the left rear quarter panel of a $2.6 million automobile according to a device nobody in that building knew existed 0.4 of 1 G. 4 months of his life were in that paint. Every one of you. Pell said, Low. Now. This wasn't for the room. Every single time. Clean shirt. Clean books. Clean shop. And underneath it, there's always product. Always. Marcus said nothing. His eyes closed. 2 seconds. Then open. And right there, at 6:19 and 40 seconds, the arithmetic finally caught up with Hollis Pell, somewhere in the middle of moving another man's money into a bag. It occurred to him that he had thrown scalding coffee onto a citizen's chest. In a room with 9 witnesses, 4 feet in front of a rookie who does what he's told at 6:19 and 44 seconds p.m. A hand came into the frame of Wade Purnell's body camera, and the recording ended. The device log records the method somebody pressed and held the power button for 3.2 seconds. 23 seconds later, 6, 20, and 7 seconds, the cuffs closed on Marcus Treadway's wrists inside a building he owned. They were not double-locked. That's week 1. It stops the ratchet from walking tighter under pressure. It takes 1 second, and the tool is on the key. You do not forget to double-lock a man's cuffs. You decline to, and at 6, 20, and 31 seconds, with a knee between his shoulder blades and his cheek on concrete, he'd poured himself in 2017. Marcus Treadway heard Hollis Pell say the sentence, "This entire story exists to put in front of a jury. You know what your problem is. You built something, and you thought that meant it was yours?" Spate zipped the bag, filled out a form on the hood, wrote "Approx" in the amount box, left the case number blank because there wasn't one, and signed it with a mark like a heart monitor. Pell flicked it at the floor. The way you flick a tip onto a table. That's your receipt. Chief. Frame it. It landed in a smear of transmission fluid in Bay 4. 9 people saw all of it. 2 were holding phones. Neither pressed record. One of them was Twig. And at 7:08 p.m., 52 minutes after a cup of coffee went across a man's name, Wade Purnell walked into a locker room at the end of his shift, set his camera into a wall cradle, and went home to his girlfriend. 4 minutes of video climbed a wire into a county server. Nobody watched it. Nobody labeled it. Nobody knew it was there. 52 minutes. That's how long it took. Everything after this is just the 11 months it took anybody to notice. They never charged him. That's the design. Not un accident. No charge means no arraignment. No public defender. No discovery. No docket. No judge. No record. There is nothing to fight, only a form. They held him 4 hours and 33 minutes. Gave him back his belt and his wallet, and put him out a side door at 1:047 at night. Nobody offered him a ride. He got back to Dell Street at 1:120. 9 people were still there. Nobody had left. Nobody had said anything for an hour. Somebody had killed the overheads and left 1 work lamp burning over Bay 6. 41 pages were still lying in the transmission fluid in Bay 4. And the pink receipt was still lying on top of them, because nobody in that building had been able to make themselves touch any of it. Marcus got down on the concrete and picked up every sheet, 41 wet pages and 1 pink carbon, in order, the way they'd been in the folder, and he filed them. That's who he was. A man who filed things. Then he took off his shirt. The coffee had gone brown across the chest and dried stiff, and you could still read every letter of the name. He did not wash it. He put it in a clean trash bag, wrote the date on the bag with a paint marker, and set it on the shelf next to a brown accordion folder that said, "Woos." 11 months later, a federal prosecutor held that bag up in front of 12 people and called it Government's Exhibit 1. "Let me see your hands." Twig said, "I'm all right. Let me see your hands." Antoine Beausoleil was 23 and had never once told Marcus Treadway to do anything. He did it then. His voice cracked on the second word. And Marcus put his hands out under the lamp. Both wrists were open. Not scraped. Open. A band of purple above each hand, where the ratchet had walked itself 1 click tighter every time he shifted his weight on that concrete for 4 hours and 33 minutes. Under the purple, on the left, a seam where the skin had split. Twig took 4 pictures with the phone he had not pressed record on. 2 became government's exhibits, 14 and 15. Then Marcus did the thing he was actually good at. He got a legal pad and 9 pens and stood in the middle of his own garage at midnight with his wrists wrapped in shop rags. Write down what you heard. Not what you felt. What you heard. The words. In the order they came. If you can't remember a word, leave a blank. Don't fill it in. Don't talk to each other. Sign it. Date it. And write the time you're writing it. Not the time it happened. Pearl asked why the time she was writing it mattered. Because in 8 months, a lawyer's going to stand up and say, "You all got together and made this up." I want the paper to say you didn't. 9 statements. Nobody talked. It took 40 minutes. Then he graded them. Source, reliability A through F. Credibility, 1 through 6. The way he'd graded things for 6 years. Twig's was B2, the kid wrote. He said something about product. I think, and left a blank. And a blank is worth more than a guess. His own. He graded F6. Then he set it aside. Because a complainant's account is the least reliable document in any file that has ever been built. The fact that it happened to him did not make it evidence. It made it a claim. Saturday morning. Marcus Treadway sat in a kitchen chair in a dark house and looked at a phone. He enlisted at 18 in 1990. By 1997, he was in the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta. He did the part you've seen in a movie for 11 years. And I won't spend your time on it. Here's the part nobody makes a movie about. In 2006, they moved him into a windowless building at Joint Special Operations Command and put him in charge of packets. A packet is a file. Before anybody in that world goes through anybody's door. Somebody builds it. Who? Where? Sourced how? Corroborated by what? Graded. Dated. Timelined. Then a lawyer takes it apart. If it survives, the door gets opened. If it doesn't, the man on the other side goes on being alive. Marcus Treadway spent the last 6 years of his career learning one thing at a level almost no living American has learned it. The file is the weapon. Everything else is just the delivery system. He called a number that routes through 3 countries. Well, I'll be damned, said August Larimer. I had you dead or golfing. What do you need? Boss, Marcus told him. All of it. The name on the shirt. The laugh. The 41 pages. The knee. 11 seconds of silence. When Larimer came back, it was a different voice. Names. Give me 2 hours. I'll hand you their financials. Their burners. Their girlfriend's burners. GPS for 8 months. And every box either of them has ever breathed on. These boys strap themselves to a bomb and don't know the fuse is lit. No, Marcus said. Don't touch them. You touch one phone and everything downstream is fruit. And there's nothing downstream I can hand a lawyer. You'd be building me a packet I can't use. Nobody would ever know. I'd know. And here's the other thing. He looked at the window. If I beat them that way, I beat them as a man with a phone number. There's a kid on Bell Ridge Road right now with a busted taillight who does not have a phone number. What happens to him on Tuesday? Larimer didn't say anything for a while. Gus, if I take from them the way they took from me, the only thing anybody learns is that the stronger man wins. He hung up. They already know that. He said, to nobody. That's the whole thing they know. Tuesday morning. 8:40 M. In a windowless basement room with a dehumidifier that had been broken since March. Doreen Quillen sat down at a terminal. Doreen was 61. Records and property. 29 years. $52,400 a year. General Order 14 requires a post-seizure identity verification on any forfeiture over $100,000 within 5 business days. Nobody does this. It's a line on a checklist that gets initialed, "Dorian did it." She'd done it every time for 29 years. Because it was on the checklist. And it was Tuesday. And that's what Tuesdays are for. She typed Treadway, comma, MEAHERCUS, and the date of birth, off the form. She hit enter. The screen went white for 4 seconds. Then it did not come back the way it comes back. Restricted record. Department of Defense. Tier 1 verification required. This inquiry has been logged. Owning agency notified 8:41 and 19 seconds. Cease. Doreen Quillen read it twice. She didn't gasp. She'd been in that basement since before some of these detectives could drive. What she noticed was the word notified, past tense, and the timestamp was 4 seconds old. Somebody, somewhere, already knew. Before she did. And then Doreen Quillen did the single most consequential thing anybody does in this entire story. It took 9 seconds, and she did not know she was doing it. She printed 2 copies. One went in the file. One went in her purse. Because in 29 years down there, she had learned exactly one thing. And she'd learned it in 1998, when a lieutenant walked out of her room with a folder that was never seen again. The file is the only thing in this building they can't transfer to nights. She carried the red page up 2 flights and knocked on a door. And Deputy Chief Lyle Fenn read it. And Doreen watched a man come apart on the inside, while absolutely nothing happened on the outside. He said, "Thank you, Doreen." And that's your reveal. A grandmother with a printout on a Tuesday. Because it was on the list. He didn't read the file. Nobody reads the file. That's what Tier 1 means. What Fenn got 4 hours later was a phone call from a man who identified himself only by a position and a fax of 1 page. Treadway. Marcus O. Sergeant Major. Retired. 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment. Delta. Silver Star. 2 bronze stars with V device. A line marked Final Assignment, redacted with a black bar so wide it looked like a joke. Fenn did not call the FBI. He called Hollis Pell. And what he said was, "Is there anything in this I need to know about? Not what did you do. What do I need to know about?" Lyle Fenn had spent 19 years learning to ask the second question. And here's what neither of them ever understood. There was no operation. Nobody was watching. No wire. No bait. No federal file, with Marcus Treadway's name in it. Pell picked him because he was a black man on Dell Street with a floor safe. Internal Affairs opened a file on the 9th day. Not because of Marcus, because of the red screen. That's the whole institution in one line. Nobody in that department opened a file because a man got put on his own floor. They opened one because a computer said a word they didn't have clearance for. Sergeant Nora Ballesteros drew it. She asked Wade Purnell whether he'd had a view of who shut his camera off. And Wade Purnell, 26. $11,000 in student loans. A father who'd cried at his academy graduation looked at her and said, "I was at the door. I didn't have a view." She knew. 9 years on that job, and she knew exactly what a 26-year-old looks like in the 4 seconds after he decides something. "Okay," she said, and she wrote it down. Hold on to that. It's what nearly kills this case. Not the taped lenses. Not Pell. Not Fenn. A kid at a door who was scared. 11 days after the raid. Wade Purnell was in the hallway outside the bullpen when Hollis Pell came out of the men's room. Drying his hands on his pants. Purnell. He didn't stop walking. You cut the property loose yet? Purnell said. Sir, Treadway. Spate says the paperwork's still open. You cut it loose. Or is it still sitting? 11 days earlier, he'd used that word as an insult. With his knee in a man's back. Now, he was using it as a noun. He wasn't making a point. He wasn't even being cruel. He was asking about a file. The property. In a hallway. Out loud. To a 26-year-old, the word does all the work by itself. It has been doing that work for 400 years. And Hollis Pell reached for it. The way you reach for a stapler. Now let me be fair to him. 2 days before, Pell had stood in a briefing room and given a speech. And he meant every syllable. 91 pounds of fentanyl came through this county last year. 91 pounds. You know what that is in doses. More than there are people in this county. Twice over. There's a 14-year-old in the Kiln district who is not going to see 15. And nobody's putting his name on a slide. I'm the line. I am the only reason your kid gets to be bored. Here's the most dangerous thing about Hollis Pell. And it isn't what you think. He wasn't lying. 91 pounds is a real number. The 14-year-old is a real boy. Pell went to his grave, believing the dead boy and the knee on Marcus Treadway's back were the same act. He could use his prejudice as a cover precisely because he sincerely believed in the cover and because for 19 years and $4.1 million a year, Ardmore County kept telling him he was right to. That's not a monster. Monsters are easy. You can fire a monster. Wade Purnell walked out to the lot and got in his car. He sat in it for 12 minutes without starting the engine. Ballesteros brought Pell in on the 14th day. Recorded. Sworn. Detective. There's no video of this incident. No, ma'am. Your camera and Detective Spate's both had obstructions on the lens. Lint. Pell said, those things ride in a vest all day. It happens. Officer Purnell's camera powered off at 6:19 and 44 seconds. Yeah. His unit was defective. We wrote it up. Pell shrugged. It was hot that day. Those batteries, ma'am. I've been here 19 years. They don't hold like they used to. Pour sentence. Sworn. Recorded. That is a violation of Title 18. Section 10. 1. 5 years. All by itself. And he gave it away for free. Because he could not conceive of a universe in which anybody would ever check, understand what he was covering. He wasn't protecting a sentence. He'd thrown a cup of scalding coffee onto a citizen's chest at 6:16 and 20 seconds in the evening. 4 feet in front of a rolling camera. And there were 4 minutes of it, somewhere in a building he walked into every morning, on day 6. Something had arrived at Hollis Pell's house. His wife signed the green card at 9:40 inches the morning, left it on the counter, and went to work. 2 pages. Not a threat. Nothing a lawyer could call a threat. A litigation hold. In language so boring, your eyes slide off it. Putting Pell on personal notice to preserve every recording, device log, and dispatch tape relating to Ardmore County Form FC3. Control number 04417. It knew the control number. There's a version of this where a man breaks into that kitchen at 3 in the morning and leaves a rifle cartridge on the island. That's a fantasy. And it lets you off the hook. Because a bullet on your counter is a thing you can be a victim of. A green USPS card that your wife signed is not, from that morning forward. Deleting anything was not a cover-up. It was a separate felony, with a date on it. And his wife's signature, 3 days later, in a parking deck. Spate explained what that meant. A hard shutdown doesn't wipe a body camera file. It orphans it. It uploads into the bulk bucket with no case number. No officer tag. No retention flag. Not gone. Unfindable. Which is not the same word. You can't search for a thing that isn't labeled. Spate said, "Nobody can. Not them. Not us. Then it's gone." Hollis. Spate lit a cigarette with a hand that had started doing something new lately. If I pull a bulk bucket audit to find it and kill it, that's a log entry with my name on it. On a file I have no case number for. In a matter that's open with internal affairs. And Pell finally understood. There were 4 minutes of video sitting in a county server, 1,100 feet from his desk. It showed him committing a battery and saying every word of it out loud. He could not reach it. He could not delete it. And every attempt to do either was a fresh felony with his name in the log. So they left it there for 81 days. 4 minutes of Hollis Pell being Hollis Pell sat in a bucket labeled nothing. And every human being who knew it existed was too frightened to go look for it. On day 19, Lyle Fenn made his move. It was elegant. And it very nearly worked. He didn't fight. He administratively voided the seizure. There's a box on a form for that. You check it. You write insufficient nexus. You sign it, and the seizure never happened. It's a typo at scale. On day 21, an armored car came down Dell Street, and $250,000 came back into Marcus Treadway's building on a hand truck. The kid in the bank uniform held out a clipboard and said the thing, "Sign here." "Sir, sorry for the wait. Thank you for your patience." Marcus signed. He said, "Thank you." He walked the kid to the door and held it for him. Then he went and sat in his own truck in his own lot and did not start the engine, because the closing was Monday, 10 a.m. And on Monday, he'd been a man with no money. He didn't close. The following Thursday, 41 Dell Street sold to a logistics company out of Charlotte that put a fence around it and does not use it for anything. They gave back the money. They did not give back the building. The building was never theirs to give back. There are 4 names on a yellow legal pad in a drawer on Dell Street. Nobody ever called them. The meeting was on the 26th day. 4th floor of the federal building. And Assistant United States Attorney Miriam Odell was not a villain. "Mr. Treadway, I believe you. I'm saying that first, because everything after it is going to sound like I don't." She put her hand flat on the folder. "Start with the coffee. Because the coffee is my best fact, and I want you to hear what happens to it. 9 people say, Detective Pell threw a cup of coffee on your chest. Detective Pell says he set the cup on the fender and you backed into it. There is no video. It's a misdemeanor battery in state court in this county. And it dies in a week. And the week it dies in. It takes everything attached to it. And here's what'll keep you up. The coffee is the only reason a jury would ever understand why a 54-year-old man handed an armed stranger the key to his own safe. And the coffee is the one thing I cannot prove. So, 1. You open the safe. Your own words. I'll open it. Strip the coffee out, and I have to strip it out, and that reads as consent. A jury will hear consent. Tfo. 41 pages. Face up on your desk. Ready. She looked up. He stands in front of 12 people and says, "This man was ready." And Marcus Treadway sat in a federal building and heard a United States attorney say in a kinder register, "With regret." Meaning, well, the exact sentence, Hollis Pell said, in his garage. "You know who has paperwork? People who knew they'd need paperwork. I run a shop where people leave me cars worth more than my house." He said, "I have paperwork for the coffee." I know. She kept going. Because that was her job. 3. 9 witnesses. Everyone works for you or lives on your street. 9 friends of the complainant. That's how they'll be introduced. And that's how a jury hears them. 4. She stopped. 4 is the one you're going to hate. She turned a page. Your record. Sergeant Major. Retired. First SFOD Delta. 6 years at JSOC. They won't hide it. They'll lead with it. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not an auto mechanic. This is a trained operator who spent 6 years building evidentiary packages against human targets and who 12 hours later collected 9 coordinated written statements from his own employees at midnight in his own garage. With nobody else present, Marcus said, very quietly, I graded them. I know. That's worse. Sir, the most damning document in this file is the one that proves how good you are at this. And that red screen is the only reason there's a file at all. And it's the reason I can't try it. The second 12 people hear Delta Force. This stops being a man on his own floor. It's a spook and a hick, and I know which way that goes in Ardmore County. If I lose, jeopardy attaches, and Hollis Pell is untouchable for life. She closed the folder, and there's no video. There's a form that was voided, which the county will tell a grand jury was a clerical error, corrected in 19 days. And they will be believed, because it was corrected in 19 days. That is Lyle Fenn's masterpiece. He did not beat the evidence. He beat the system that was supposed to process the evidence. He filled out a form correctly and on time. The correctness of the form is the crime. And there is no box on any form in America for that. Odell said, I'm declining. That week, a code inspector nobody had called red-tagged the paint booth for a ventilation issue that had passed every year since 2017. Twig quit on a Friday. He didn't have another job. He stood in the office door and couldn't get the words out, and finally said, I can't be here. Mr. Treadway, I'm sorry. And Marcus Treadway said, go on. So, 26 days after 9 people watched a man get put on his own floor, no case. No charge. No video. No money missing. No building. No apprentice. And a red tag on the paint booth. And that's what happens. That is what happens almost every single time. The only reason you're still watching is that this one time, a 79-year-old woman got a letter about a scratch, 51 days after the raid. Wade Purnell walked into the Internal Affairs office without an appointment. He wasn't in uniform. That should have told them. He reached into his jacket, took out his badge, and set it on the table. He set it down before he spoke. Not after. I lied to you. He said, on the 9th. I want it on the record, and I want it now. Before I think about it anymore, please turn the camera on. She turned the camera on the 20th, at approximately 6:19 p.m. I was standing 4 feet inside the side door of Treadway Coach and Restoration. I had a clear and unobstructed view. Detective Hollis Pell reached across and powered off my camera. I saw him do it. He looked at me while he did it. 23 seconds later, he put Mr. Treadway face down on the floor and knelt on his back and said, quote, you know what your problem is. You built something, and you thought that meant it was yours. End quote. On the 9th, you asked me if I had a view, and I told you I didn't. That was a lie. I knew it was a lie when I said it. Nobody told me to say it. I said it because I was scared of what would happen to me. And on day 11, in the second floor hallway, Detective Pell referred to Mr. Treadway in my presence as the property. Ballesteros stopped writing. Say that last part again. He called him the property. Mum. Purnell's voice didn't shake. That's the thing everybody remembers about that tape. And write the next part down exactly how I say it. He wasn't making a point. He wasn't trying to be ugly. He was asking me about a file. There it is. There's the case. He resigned that afternoon. He had to. He'd sworn a false statement to Internal Affairs. And the file is a weapon. And a weapon cuts in every direction. That's what makes it a weapon. He'd given her the sentence. And he'd given the defense a witness who had already sworn a false statement about this exact incident. In this exact room. To this exact sergeant. He's not a witness. She told her deputy. He's a gift. They'll cross him for 40 minutes and he'll cry. And the jury will decide it's just cops lying about each other, which is what a jury in this county wants to decide anyway, because it lets them go home. So we need somebody who isn't a cop. No. Odell stared at the ceiling. I need a machine. I need something that doesn't have a career. Roberta Loomis was 79. She lived alone in Bell Ridge in a house full of a dead man's things. And in the 3rd month, she got a letter from her insurance company, Automatic, generated in an office park in Ohio by a system that produces about 9,000 a day. Our records indicate a possible impact event involving your covered vehicle, 1971 Plymouth Barracuda convertible. Agreed value, $2.6 million on the 20th at 1819 local. Please contact your adjuster within 30 days to avoid a coverage review. Roberta Loomis read it and got annoyed. The way you get annoyed when you think somebody has scratched your husband's car. She drove down to Dell Street on a Thursday. Walked into a garage with a red tag on the paint booth and put the envelope on the counter. Marcus, did something happen to my car? He read it 3 times. Then he asked, very carefully, the way you ask when your entire life is sitting on the answer. Mrs. Loomis, does your policy have a recovery unit on it? A. What? A tracker. Oh, that thing. She waved a hand. The insurance man made me. I didn't want it. I said, who's going to steal it? It's yellow. He said the underwriter requires it. On a car worth $2.6 million. The carrier mandates a theft recovery unit. Com GPS, accelerometer, cellular radio, cabin microphone. When it feels an impact over a threshold, it wakes up and records 4 minutes of cabin audio, because if somebody's stealing your car, the carrier would like to know what they're saying while they do it. At 6:19 and 11 seconds p.m. on the 20th, the unit on Roberta Loomis's CUDA felt 0.4 of 1 G because a police officer put a 54-year-old man into the left rear quarter panel. It recorded 4 minutes through an open, convertible top in a concrete room 11 feet from a man's mouth. Then it uploaded to a server in Ohio, dropped into a claims queue, and, because no human being ever opened, it was scheduled to auto-purge at 90 days. It was day 73. Nobody put that microphone in that car. Not Marcus. Not the Bureau. An underwriter did. 2 years earlier. For a completely unrelated reason. Over the objection of a 79-year-old widow who thought it was silly, Marcus Treadway put both palms flat on that counter and had to stand there a second. Mrs. Loomis, I need to make a phone call. Then I need you to talk to a lady from the FBI and tell her exactly what you just told me. Not one word more. Marcus. She frowned. Did you scratch my car? No, ma'am. Well then, what on earth is the matter with you? Delia March had a federal grand jury subpoena in Ohio by Friday. The car heard the end. 4 minutes. 6:19 and 11 seconds to 6:23 and 11 seconds. At 6:20 and 31 seconds, you can hear it clean. Through an open convertible top, 11 feet from his mouth. You know what your problem is. You built something, and you thought that meant it was yours? And under it, a small mechanical sound The transcriber could not identify. Twice. 11 seconds apart. A man's handcuffs. Ratcheting one click tighter. And Wade Purnell's camera heard the beginning. With a warrant. The Bureau pulled every orphaned file in that bucket and watched all of them. It took 9 days. File 4,000 and something. No case number. No tag. 4 minutes and 6 seconds. Starting at 6:15 and 38 seconds p.m. Holis Pell. In frame. In focus. In color. Who did you steal this shop from? Boy, don't make me laugh. The cup coming across. The sound the coffee makes hitting cotton, and every one of the 12 people who eventually watched it flinched at that. Because it's the sound of something scalding hitting a chest. And everybody on Earth knows that sound. Every one of your color is just a target waiting to happen. Your kind always has fake papers. 41 pages going into the fluid. 2 files. 2 halves of one crime. Neither one worth anything alone, and here is what welds them together. And it is 33 seconds long. Purnell's camera ran 6:15 and 38 seconds to 6:19 and 44 seconds. The car's file starts at 6:19 and 11 seconds. They overlap by 33 seconds. 2 devices. 2 owners. 2 chains of custody. 1 orphaned in a county server, because the men who wanted it dead were too scared to look for it. 1 in a claims queue in Ohio, 12 days from deletion. Owned by a widow who thought the whole thing was silly. Neither knew the other existed. Nobody could have edited a frame of either without the overlap coming apart at the seams. And it matches. Waveform for waveform. To the millisecond. There is no lawyer on this earth who can argue with that. And then the 9 statements came out of a drawer. 9 handwritten pages. Signed. Dated. Timestamped 1214 A.M. 12 A.M. 12 A.M. Written independently at 9 benches by 9 people, told not to talk to each other 81 days, before any human being on the planet knew a recording existed. 3 of them had blanks in them, because a person coordinating a lie does not leave a blank. A person coordinating a lie fills it in. That's the entire tell. That's the only tell there has ever been. Miriam Odell laid 9 statements alongside a transcript of a recording nobody knew about when the statements were written. And read across, line by line. And the words matched 9 friends of the complainant. She said out loud, to an empty room. Then no. 9 independent corroborations of a tape. The tape made them credible, and they made the tape unimpeachable. And he'd graded his own account F6 and set it aside because it happened to him. And that made it a claim. That decision, made at 12:40 inches the morning by a man in a great deal of pain, is why the file survived the lawyer. Odell reopened it on a Monday. What the grand jury got? Over 2 days. Was 2 machines, both pulled out of that county's own basement on a statutory clock, because a man had filed a request with her name on it. Machine 1, a swipe log. Ardmore County issues, Form FC3, out of a supply cage. Pre-numbered. In sequence. You badge in to take one. And the reader writes a line. 04416, issued the 9th. Sembilan, Heblas, M. Used that day. Traffic seizure on Route 9, 04418, issued the 9th. Sembilan, and Numblas, A.M. Used that day. Hotel seizure off the interstate, 04417, issued to Detective Hollis Pell. The 9th. Sembilan and Putblas, M. And then it did not exist for 11 days. It sat in his jacket pocket. Through 2 weekends, waiting for a shop. The anonymous tip came in on the 20th at 4:41 inches the afternoon. The tip did not cause the raid. The raid caused the tip. There was never a basis. There was a blank form in a jacket pocket for 11 days. Looking for a name to put on it. Machine 2. 3.2 seconds. Every body camera in that county writes a device log. Power state and the method of every state change. At 18:19 and 44 seconds. Unit 4471. Assigned to Officer W. Purnell. Powered off. Reason code manual. And the log records the duration of the button hold, 3.2 seconds. Batteries do not hold themselves down for 3.2 seconds. Heat does not hold a button. Lint does not hold a button. And this is the sentence that ends Hollis Pell. The camera did not go off because of what happened. What happened? Happened because the camera went off. 23 seconds. That's the gap. That's all of it. A man made a decision. Executed it with a 3.2-second press. Then used the 23 seconds he'd bought. They took them on a Wednesday morning. No convoy, that's a thing for movies. 4 agents walked into the bullpen at 7:40 a.m. And it was over in 90 seconds. The warrant on the storage facility off Route 9 was executed at the same hour. Unit 402 was not empty. The door went up and it was full. $387,400 in vacuum bags. 9 pounds of jewelry in a Tupperware container. A Rolex Submariner with initials on the caseback J. A. R. Never claimed. Because you cannot claim a thing that was never logged as taken from you. 2 boxes of catering invoices belonging to a woman named Inez Portilla, taken because they happened to be in the same bag as her cash. And a child's bicycle. Purple. Streamers on the handlebars. A little rust on the chain. Nobody ever found out whose bicycle. They tried. Delia March personally tried for 4 months. There's no report. There's no form. There's no number on it and no name on it and no case attached to it because there was never a case, because that was the entire point. And somewhere in Ardmore County there is a grown person who was once a kid whose bike a police officer took and who has no idea, to this day, that it ended up in a storage unit on Route 9. In February, the Ardmore County Commission holds its budget hearing. Fenn was on leave. So, somebody else read his slides. They got to 9. The bar chart, the number, $4,118,000, and the chairwoman said, "Before we vote on this line, the U.S. Attorney's Office has asked to put something in the record." They played 4 minutes of audio over the slide. The slide stayed up the whole time, because nobody could think to take it down. You know who has paperwork. People who knew they'd need paperwork. You know what your problem is. You built something, and you thought that meant it was yours? And underneath it, a sound nobody in that room could identify, which the transcript renders as unintelligible mechanical. It was a man's handcuffs ratcheting 1 click tighter. Then exhibits 14 and 15 went up. A 54-year-old man's wrists under a work lamp at 1120 at night. Taken by a 23-year-old with the phone he had not pressed record on. And then a woman from the U.S. Attorney's Office walked to the front of that chamber carrying a clear plastic bag with a date on it in paint marker, and held up a navy work shirt with a brown stain dried across the chest. You could still read every letter of the name. Nobody said anything for a while. The county came to him with a number. $1.4 million the shop. The building. The 4 names on the legal pad. And a retirement. 1 condition. Not even hidden mutual non-disparagement. Boilerplate. Every settlement in America has one. Odell said. Mr. Treadway. That is a very serious number. And Marcus Treadway said, delete the line. I'm sorry. $4,118,000. Slide Nina. Take that line out of the budget. Every dollar this county seizes goes into a fund the department cannot touch. Spend. Apply for. Borrow against. Or requisition from. Not one lift. Not one vest. Not $1. That's my number. That's the whole number. I don't want the 1.4. Sir, you are legally entitled to. Mom? He leaned forward. You cannot fix a man who is paid by the pound. You can only stop paying him by the pound. If you give me $1.4 million. This was a story about a man who got a settlement. Somebody makes a video about it. Everybody feels good for 11 minutes. And in February, the bars still go up. And Harvest still runs. And Hollis Pell's replacement, a nice man with a mortgage and a kid in braces, takes $9,400 off a woman on Vine Street next Tuesday. You're not buying my silence. There's no NDA. Delete the line. Odell said it later. To her deputy, I have prosecuted killers who were easier to negotiate with. He's not angry. That's the problem. She rubbed her eyes. Angry people take deals. Ordinance 4117 passed in March. 7-2. The papers wanted to call it the Treadway Ordinance. Marcus called the county clerk himself and asked them not to. Somewhere in the Ardmore County Code, there's a paragraph with a number and no name on it. And that is the only thing he ever asked anybody for. Now, this is the part the version of this story you were expecting does not have. It's the only part that matters. Unes Portilais 424. In 2021, Pell and Spate took $9,400 out of her van in a parking lot on Vine Street. Produce money. She had a catering business and bought from a wholesaler who wanted cash and gave her 9 points for it. She was never charged. There was never a case. There was a form. She called a lawyer. And the lawyer told her the truth. Which is the worst part. Filing fee $430. Retainer $3,000. 18 months to 3 years. And you might win. She was fighting for $9,400. The lawyer said gently. Because he was a decent man trying to save her from herself. Mom, it costs more than it's worth. And that is the machine. That's the whole machine. In one sentence. Said kindly. By a good lawyer. Who was correct. Inez Portilla lost the business in 2022. She cleans offices at night now. Her invoices were in a box in Unit 402. And she didn't know that until an FBI agent knocked on her door and asked her to identify her own handwriting. The U.S. Attorney's Office reopened 141 Harvest seizures. At the press conference, somebody asked Miriam Odell how many of the 141 would get their money back. She said, most of them. It'll take about 2 years. And a woman near the back, not a reporter. She'd just come, asked the second question. How many of them get back the thing the money was for? Nobody answered her. Not because it was rude. Because there is no answer. The money was for a semester. A surgery. A truck. A down payment. A lawyer. A chance in a warehouse at 41 Dell Street that a logistics company out of Charlotte put a fence around and does not use for anything. Before trial, Marcus Treadway filed a motion in limine. He moved to exclude his own military record. Not the defense. Him. The victim. Moving to keep the single most impressive fact about himself out of the trial of the men who put him on his own floor. Odell begel him not to. Sir. They will love you. That's the problem. Because here's what he'd understood. since 6:16 p.m. on the 20th, standing in a shop with his own name stitched on his chest. If the reason this is a crime is who I turned out to be, then it was never a crime when it happened to anybody else. And Inez Portilla is not a sergeant major. The judge denied the motion. He had to the defense had already noticed Marcus as a trained operative. And once they opened that door, the government was entitled to walk through it. So Marcus Treadway sat in a courtroom and watched 12 people learn what he used to be, and watched their faces change. They came back in 2 hours and 9 minutes. Guilty. All counts. He knew. Of course he knew. He sat there and knew exactly what those 2 hours and 9 minutes were made of. Hollis Pell, 216 months. 18 years. Conspiracy against rights. Deprivation of rights under color of law, with bodily injury. Hobbs Act extortion. And false statement to a federal officer, the 4 sentences about the batteries, which he gave away for free. Arlo Spate, 151 months. He cooperated on day 211, 210 days after he stood in a driveway, and told his partner that man wasn't scared of us. Hollis, and then did nothing about it. The 12 years and 7 months are for the 210 days. Lyle Fenn, 87 months. Obstruction. For a personnel transfer, he signed on day 31 that moved an internal affairs sergeant to nights. Fenn never touched anybody. He built the machine, put its earnings on a slide. Never once asked what it ate, and he got the least. Miriam Odell will tell you, after 2 drinks, that this is the arithmetic of her profession, and she has never made peace with it. The federal case. The indictments. 216 months. The consent decree. That's not the win. That's the consequence. Here's the win. Doreen Quillen ran a check on a Tuesday because it was Tuesday. She printed 2 copies because the 1898 a lieutenant walked out of. She pulled the cage log because a records request has a clock on it, and her name was on the clock. 61. 29 years in that basement. $52,400 a year. Her salary did not change. That's the part people forget. Wade Purnell is not a police officer. He does HVAC. He put his badge on the table before he spoke. It cost him everything. And he says he'd do it again, in a way that makes you understand he's had to decide it more than once. Roberta Loomis never really understood what she did. She tells it as a story about her paint. She got the car back in April. It's still curious yellow. And Antoine Beausoleil, who didn't press record, and who came back to Dell Street 11 weeks later, and stood in the doorway and couldn't get it out. And Marcus said, "Grab an apron." The paint booth got unred tagged in June. Marcus Treadway is 55 now. Navy work shirt. Name stitched over his heart in white thread. Treadway. 10 years on it now. $19 Timex on a canvas strap. The folder is still on the shelf by the office door. Brown accordion. Soft at the corners. There are 9 handwritten pages in it now. 4 photographs. And 1 property receipt. Control number 04417. Still stained from the floor of Bay 4. He filed it. That's who he is. A reporter caught him on the courthouse steps and asked whether the jury would have convicted if they hadn't known what he used to be. Ask Inez Portilla, he said. Then he went back to work. Because there was a fender that needed buffing. And there always is. Twig drives home down Vine at night. There's a little camera stuck to his windshield on a mount he made himself out of an old bracket. Because he works in a shop, it's always on. 9 people watched a man get put on his own floor by a badge, and it took a widow's insurance policy. A clerk's Tuesday. A rookie's $11,000 in student loans. 4 minutes of audio. 12 days from deletion, a pre-numbered form, 33 seconds of overlap, and 22 years in a unit whose name is redacted on the paperwork, all of it, every single piece of it, just to get a court to believe 9 people, about 23 seconds. Marcus Treadway had all of that. What does the next man have? This story is a work of fiction. All persons, agencies, and locations depicted are fictional, and any resemblance to actual persons or departments is coincidental. Tell me in the comments who you think actually won this one, because I don't think it was him. And if you want the ones where the system doesn't get fixed, because most of the time it doesn't subscribe, that's where those live.